Hey gang, welcome to the Roman Republic PowerPoint presentation. This is what I like to call the death of the monarchy, basically the birth of a republic. Just as a little recap of where we were before, remember that the Romans essentially won their independence. Brutus and Collatinus revolted against that seventh king, Tarquin Superbus. And once the Romans regained their freedom from this tyrannical king, the Roman people were left without any type of government, without any type of king. So they had a lot of decisions that needed to be made. And just something to keep in mind is, although they are developing this idea of the republic, it's going to take a little bit of time for them to figure these things out. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by looking at what we call SPQR. Now, SPQR was simply an acronym used by the Romans to just explain that they would never ever have a king again. They would never be under a monarchic rule, that they would basically give the Senate to the people of Rome, and the people of Rome would lead the direction and would be the guiding light for many generations to come. The idea behind SPQR was essentially that it was a publicity campaign. And this publicity campaign was etched into every building, every monument, every temple, synagogue, you name it. It was a constant reminder that Rome would never be ruled by a king ever again, and that the Roman people won their independence and will continue to lead in the direction of the Romans. This is a diagram of the Roman government. Now we're going to look a little bit deeper into the Roman government by focusing on a few branches. The one branch we're going to start off with is the Roman Consul. Now, the Roman Consul, although this is the beginning, is not actually the first government or form of government that was established in Rome. Believe it or not, it was the Senate. And looking back at the seven kings of Rome, Romulus was actually the creator of the Roman Senate. But looking at the consul members, essentially what we're going to have here are two people who are elected on an annual basis. Now, this is obviously better than one, but it's still not a perfect system. Each person was going to have a specific duty. One council member, for example, was going to handle what we call domestic affairs, things that were happening at home. And the other was actually going to handle some military affairs, things that were going on outside of Rome. Now, each one of those council members would elect members of the Senate. And we'll talk about a little bit later here what the roles of the Senate was. And they would hand select those individuals, those 300 Senate members. And what the problem with this system is, even though you're a council member, that those individuals were chosen, although it's an annual position, they were chosen from the patrician class. Now remember, the patrician class is the extremely wealthy, the aristocratic Romans that were wealthy landowners that control the majority of the wealth. And obviously, you could sort of predict when the patricians were going to make a law, it was going to benefit the wealthy. And this, as we're going to see, is going to become a problem. Now, in case the two council members were trying to decide on a specific direction for Rome, the council members had the power to what we call veto. Now, veto actually gave the council members the right to deny a law or a suggestion made by their counter council partner. And if there was a situation where both council members could not agree, one vetoed the other, but yet a decision needed to be made swiftly, justly, quickly. They didn't have time to deliberate any longer. The consul could nominate what's called a dictator. Now, this dictator was a 6-month position, and it was a person that would be moved into this position immediately. Now, this dictator also would receive what we call a master of horse, and he would just serve as an advisor to the dictator. And we'll come to find out one of the most famous dictators was a guy by the name of Cincinnatus. But the dictator was going to be used in a situation where he could maybe intervene, fight in a military campaign, something that just needed to be done in a very quick manner. The other thing that we need to know, and it's important about the council members, was that every decision made must be unanimous. Both council members have to agree in order for that piece of legislation to pass. This is a picture of the SPQR. Again, this was that branded idea. This was that propaganda that was used by the Roman people. The picture on the left here is a depiction of the Roman Senate, and here you have a consul member sitting on his throne. The consul member, again, would sort of lead the progression or the procession of the actual meetings between the assembly members, between the Senate members. Now, let's look at one of the most famous dictators. A working farming Roman by the name of Cincinnatus was called upon by the consul members because of an invading Aequian invasion. Now, the Aequians were invading into Rome, and the consul members could not band themselves together quickly enough, so they decided to bring in Cincinnatus. Now, what makes this such an amazing story was the fact that Cincinnatus was able to leave his farm, assemble a military, and defeat his enemy within 15 days. And then he gives up the throne or gives up the dictatorship and goes back to farm. Now, he has control of the Roman army. He is a tremendously powerful individual at this point. So you can only imagine what type of character that person must have been to give up that power. He still has 4 more months that he could have been dictator, but he gives that up to go back home. It's very similar to what George Washington did after being nominated twice for the presidency of the United States. He believed that no person shall be president for more than 2 terms. And if you kind of think about it for a little bit, he's right. Because if you have one man as president for longer than 2 terms, he could be considered a king, especially in those early time periods. And that was obviously something that the early colonists or the early Americans wanted to get away from. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is the Roman Senate. But before we get into the Senate, I'm going to stop here to keep these videos a little short. So that was just an overview of the consul. The next video, stay tuned. We're going to look at the Roman Senate.